Paul is warning them regarding the situation and having a leaven. In this context, of course, it was a leaven of badness. The act of fornication by this one man with the woman in the church, that was having an effect of the rest of the holy people as a leaven. So Paul says, don't you know that a small leaven affects the whole? The answer is yes, they knew it. They were aware of that. Paul writes, you must clean out or purge out from among you, remove the leaven that has existed for a while, for the purpose and result that you may be a new lump. So altogether, they would be a mass of people that lately originated. They would be lately or refreshed as a young group or a young lump. So they weren't going to be compared to something formerly. They were going to be refreshed, but they needed to take that leaven out from among them. Just as you are unleavened. How are they unleavened? In the spirit category. For emphatically our Passover, who is Christ, was sacrificed. Who was the true sacrifice? Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ already paid the price. There's no other price to be paid. There's no other sacrifice to be made to ask God for some service and compensation, as it were, for a sacrifice. Paul says very clearly that Christ is our Passover. He was the one who was killed. Actually, it was on the day of Passover, and that's how he's called, the Passover. Christ, our Passover, has previously been killed and offered in sacrifice to the only true God. No other sacrifice needed to be made. And the holy people should have realized this. There's no reason to be behaving in such a bad manner among the church. Let's continue. And the reason is that Paul says that Christ is our Passover. He was the Passover lamb who was sacrificed by his own freedom of will. He became the sacrificial offering to God in order to redeem us, to provide salvation for us. And all holy people have been redeemed. We have been saved. We have the Spirit of Christ in us. We are spiritually unleavened. We don't need something else to be mixed with us. That's not correct. We have Holy Spirit within us. We don't need another piece of leaven or something to be added to us. So we are spiritually unleavened, and Jesus Christ has given us what we need from God's point of view for redemption and salvation. There is nothing else that needs to be done in the spirit category. Of course, having written the instructions to the holy people regarding what they needed to do in their particular situation, Paul continues. He says, with the consequence and result that we may keep the feast. What feast? The feast of Passover, to celebrate all that Christ accomplished in his sacrifice of himself. So the holy people, and all of us, are to behave ourselves as being in a festival, joyful, in festivities because of all that Christ accomplished for us. In fact, Paul writes, he says, so how are we supposed to celebrate Christ being our Passover during the everyday living of our lives? He says, not within the sphere of action of an old leaven. And that would be referring to the old Gentilish activities or the old Judean Israeli activities. And not within the sphere of action of a leaven or something carried out by the fleshy mind or body consisting of badness, something that's contrary to God, and evilness. Evilness being, active, malignant, exercised badness. It's active. But he says, contrary to that kind of festivity, we, holy people, are to keep the feast, since we are living spiritually, having received that gift of Holy Spirit. How? Within the sphere of action of unleavened, consisting of genuineness, as though we were being examined by God in the bright sunlight and found to be genuine, sincere, and truth, living our everyday lives within the sphere of action of the truth, God's truth, the reality. We are now living in the Spirit category. We have that Christ in us, the Spirit of Christ. We are to celebrate the festival of Christ being our Passover by being unmixed or uncontaminated, unleavened. And that is within genuineness and truth. Not by eating unleavened bread such as the Old Covenant times, that's that they would do during the Old Covenant, to show that they agreed with God's plan of redemption and salvation, which was still future for them. But today we need to live and behave our lives according to what Christ has made available. We are holy people, and we ought to worship and serve God our Father according to the way that He asks us to do so, in spirit and in truth. And Paul further explains that he's writing this letter at the time to the Corinthian holy people. He said, I wrote this letter for you that you should not be mixed up together. Don't be intermingled as with intercourse or being intimate, keeping company with fornicators. So he says, I wrote this letter to you so that you would not be mixed together with fornicators. And that was in verses 2 to 5. And he says, but I'm not entirely and exclusively talking about being mixed up with fornicators belonging to this world. This world, of course, being unbelievers, those who do not have the gift of Holy Spirit within them. So Paul says, I'm not altogether talking about fornicators belonging to this world, or of covetous people belonging to this world, those people who are unbelievers, who don't have Holy Spirit, and they're always constantly wanting to have more, reaching out, intentionally grasping to get something else, or catching people belonging to this world. That refers to those who actually seize things and carry them off as snatching something suddenly from somebody else as booty, spoiling people, plundering those whom they are around. Are people belonging to this world who are idolaters, those who worship and serve idols. Since Paul says, if I were writing within the context of this world exclusively, then in correspondence to that, you would be obligated or obliged to come out from the world. And Paul is saying, I'm not telling you to leave the world. If the context of Paul's teaching to them was specifically only regarding their not being mixed together with fornicators and other such people performing activities against God who belong to the world, then he would be instructing them, the holy people, to leave the present world. That's not what he was doing, and he's making it very clear. He says the holy people of this world are the fornicators in the walk behavior category. They carry out their abominations and blasphemies against God. Doesn't matter what kind of disguise they may have. And so Paul makes it clear to the holy people that he's not talking exclusively about leaving them. Otherwise we'd have to go right now. But the context here, he says, is within the Corinthian church. That's the whole context of what he's talking about in chapter 5.